Rob, you've been all over this data center backlash in Wisconsin this week. We saw a referendum on Tuesday. We saw this horrible scene in Indiana with bullets across a window. Maine is moving to legislate. It seems like the governor's pretty soon going to sign a ban. It really does seem like this is this kind of tipping point of backlash. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've learned, over the past couple of weeks is, there's so much emphasis on how much, Bernie Sanders opposing it, AOC opposing it. But I think the people who are most empowered to stop this are local and state officials because, they're already doing it. So that's scary. It's like anybody in the country has the ability to slow us down. But I will say, I think the vast majority of data centers are still being built, even if there is opposition. We're still getting, I think there's 700 under construction currently, and thousands more are under development. Have plans to be developed. So, these people might be having wins here and there, but I still I'm still pretty optimistic that this is going to keep developing. Just hope that this doesn't turn into a big, an even bigger populist wave against this that will slow us down.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't feel organized across the country. It sort of feels like it's popping up sporadically. And I think one of the most interesting patterns, too, is that people are always really skeptical of infrastructure that's coming to their neighborhoods in the same way that they're skeptical of a coal plant or a windmill or anything. And this really feels like politicians and other entities are being able to stoke the fear around AI specifically to make that nervousness translate into something worse. And it also feels like a bad reaction to default to trying to shut down these data centers. There could be a lot of improvements made at the margins if these local entities and state officials are able to figure out how to save folks' energy bills and make it so that we can coexist with those improvements. But defaulting to just trying to ban them doesn't seem like the right path.
Dominic, you're from Wisconsin. What happened in Port Washington?
Yeah, well, like Rob was saying, it is ultimately local governments that have a lot of the power of this stuff because they control zoning, they control land use regulations more than any other level of government, and that's sort of the first line of defense against these things if you're looking to oppose them. The weird thing about this, though, is a lot of the AI technologies that we're seeing, large language models, that stuff is new in the last couple of years. But data centers are not a new thing.
Right.
Data centers have been around for a long time. Cloud computing, which we've had for many years, relies on data centers. If you look to Northern Virginia, for example, I'm slightly biased because I live there, but there's data centers all over the place.
They generate a lot of tax revenue.
They do.
They're good neighbors. They don't create crime.
No, they're very good. They've allowed Loudoun County, one of the counties where a lot of these things are located, they've been able to lower their property tax rates for everyone because the data centers pay a lot of property tax. Now, the important thing to remember too, on the other side of this, is you do have some politicians that want to subsidize data centers, that want to make them not pay taxes, that want to create special carve-outs for them. That's not necessary either. These things are economically beneficial on their own. They don't need any help from the government. And in order for them to be most economically beneficial, you do need them to be a part of the community, which includes, paying property tax like any other building would.
Yeah. There was a Quinnipiac poll, because I do want to establish, there is this hysteria. We talked about whether to include this in our editorial on the hysteria, but the Unabomber was also motivated by, and we didn't include it, but I'm going to mention it now. The
Unabomber anyway.
Yeah, Adam's not here.
Can't stop.
The Unabomber was also motivated by fear of technological change and progress, and obviously, I'm going to talk about this Quinnipiac poll that I found to be really eye-opening last week, but to be very clear, most people aren't resorting to violence, but that's what happens when you whip up this frenzy and this moral panic that and warnings of the apocalypse. And so much of the stuff that's out there is just demonstrably wrong about, for example, how much water data centers use. Just wait until people find out about how much water farms use. It's like it's kind of silly, but there is this general anxiety that is very real. So in Quinnipiac, you can see on the screen the breakdown among Republicans, Democrats, independents, men, women, widespread concern. And I do think data centers have become the stand-in for AI. I think, that people conflate them. And so in this poll, Americans 65% to 24% oppose building an AI data center in their community. And some of that is NIMBYism, but asked, if given a list of possible reasons, 72% say electricity costs, 64% say water use, 41% say noise. But then on AI, here's where the trend line is really interesting. 55% of Americans think AI will do more harm than good in their lives. Well, 34% think it'll do more good than harm. A year ago, the same poll, 44% thought AI would do more harm than good in their life. So in 1 year, we've gone from 44% to 55%.
I don't think that's an entirely unreasonable view. I mean, I disagree. I'm an optimist on AI, but I don't think it's crazy for somebody to think, wow, I think a lot of jobs are going to go away, and I don't know where I'm going to fall in the mix.
Yeah.
I think that's real.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is, other than to say, we've had a lot of technological disruptions in the past, throughout history, and jobs never just disappeared.
Right.
Usually it produces more jobs. Maybe that's being too optimistic. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and people are looking to government to do something. And so in this Quinnipiac poll, 74% of Americans think the government is not doing enough to regulate AI. And so when you have numbers that high, it's always scary because it always ends up leading to populism and sloppyism, as the kids say these days. And unfortunately, this is becoming sort of a bipartisan thing. Even yesterday, you saw the Attorney General of Florida, James Utmeyer, saying that he's launching an investigation into OpenAI and ChatGPT. He didn't specify what crimes they might have committed, what specifically is being investigated. He just said that OpenAI is hurting kids, endangering Americans, and facilitating mass shootings. And then says wrongdoers must be held accountable. So I mean, that's a conservative Republican. In Maine, you have Janet Mills, the Democratic governor, who is moving to the left because she's trailing in the polls in the Senate primary to take on Susan Collins. And her opponent, Graham Plattner, has been calling for data center bans. So now she says, I'll sign this moratorium into law. I mean, why is this, what's it going to take to stop these trend lines? Because if, I think I'm an AI optimist, actually more than an AI optimist. I think there are going to be disruptions, but no one is really out there now making the case. These companies are getting demagogued. I mean, I guess the Washington Post editorial board is making the case, but why, what politician is going to be out there saying, we need AI, let's win the future.
Well, part of what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of these localities ban data centers in places that no one was ever planning to build a data center in the first place. So that's the one thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of grandstanding by local politicians where they say, we got to stand up and ban data centers. Like nobody was even trying to. Okay, fine. You sure? I guess you can ban it. It doesn't make a difference. But in the areas where these things do need to get built, where it does make sense to build them, I do think, at some point politicians have to look at their tax base and say like, hey, this looks pretty good for us. And they can talk to local politicians in places where data centers already are, because like I said, these have been around as long as the internet has, basically. So this is not a new thing that we need to completely start from scratch on. You can talk to politicians in those areas, and I don't see a lot of them saying that we need to tear down the existing data centers,
right,
or saying that they want to prevent any more from being built.
Yeah, I also think we overestimate how exposed people are to this technology. A lot of people are using it, especially us in media, and in big cities. We're using it a lot,
Yeah.
but a lot of Americans still have not been using this very much, so they're not really judging it from an informed perspective. And I do think that's going to change over the next couple of years. They're going to get more familiar with it. They're going to start to see the benefits of it, and that's how the public's opinion is going to change. That's my hope.
I also think one of the issues with public opinion is that there's a lot of different things being conflated together. I mean, even from that statement in Florida, they're sort of combining these very real concerns about kids having access to AI, concerns about jobs being taken over by AI, and all of these other sort of smaller effects that can bundle together. And when you let all of that snowball, it can make it seem like an existential threat. And I think when it gets to the point of it seeming like an existential threat, that's when people feel like they can resort to violence or something worse. When if you break it down into those smaller component pieces, those are things that can be legislated and talked about in common sense ways. But if you bring them all together, that's sort of where it spirals.